This is the Explorations in Typography Assignment 3, Alignments, and I've got my documents set up so we can go through the most important points. And for this one, this very first one, we are doing flush left, rag right, also shortened to FLRR. And flush right, flush left means the type is set flush all the way to the grid line or the bounding box on the left. And over here on the right is where we have a nice rag. And I've already set up my colophon and my top bar here with the correct information. So remember to update to assignment 3. And we're working on alignments. We're not doing paragraph indicators anymore. And this prompt specifically is flush left. So I've called it out up here, and I've also called it out over here with all of my typesetting. And just because we're focusing on alignments with assignment 3 doesn't mean we won't have paragraph indicators. You just can choose whichever one you want and call out just the one prompt so I know specifically what you're focusing on so I can direct my critiques to those specific prompts. So I've gone ahead and set up all of my paragraph indicators with a space between already, and I have all of my typeset for the most part. So the first thing I'm going to do with flush left is I'm going to select it all. I'm going to look at what I'm working with. So I have 9/12 right now, which is a decent size. So I'm just going to take a peek at it and look at the rag. And anything I do to get this rag looking nice, I'm going to want to do globally. I'm not going to want to do too much line by line, although I can, but I want to start globally and make sure I get the rag I like with just a few simple steps. And the rag we're going to aim to get is a simple in, out, ragged edge over here. We don't want any obvious shapes such as these ones here where each line is sort of progressively going shorter and shorter, and these lines are progressively going longer and longer. So I'm getting kind of this angle here with these two paragraphs that I don't like. And I'm also getting a little bit over here as well. So in here, a couple of lines are starting to break it up a bit, but our eyes do a really good job of completing shapes. And in this case, that's not working to our advantage. So I just need to break it up a bit. And since this is already kind of big type, I think I'm just going to go ahead and set it at an 8 instead of a 9. And looking at the rag that already fixed a lot, and it also fixed one of the widows I had over here. So I'm pretty happy with that decision. Right now I just have 10 points of lead tracking. I'm going to see what a 20 looks like. I don't like that. I'm going to go back to a 10. And that seems to work a little better. The rag is not perfect, but for the most part, there's nothing super large as far as shapes that I don't like. But I do have this widow here I need to get rid of, so I'm going to see what I can do to get rid of it. I'm going to just go down, and that's not working. I'm going to go up to 20 points of tracking, and that fixed it, so I'm happy with that. And then I'm going to go line by line and just check out a couple of other areas of concern to see if I can fix those. And one of those is this first line right here. I'm going to select the whole thing and go up to a 20. And possibly I will go up to this line too and set that at a 20. Neither one of those fixed the issue I was having completely, but it did blend it in a little bit. So now I can look down my rag and see that it's generally shapes of lines making shapes that just go in and out and nothing dramatic for shape. So I'm going to call that done and be happy with that. And move on to justified. So justified type is set flush on both sides. And there's a few different ways to set justified type. And I want you to just focus on one of them. So I'm going to select all the type up here and I'll show you the differences. And they're up here in your control panel. And if you hover over it, they usually tell you what they are at some point. And I'll start with the last one. This is full justified. And what you can see is happening here is it's forcing even the last line to go justified, and it looks terrible. So I definitely don't want that. I've never actually used that, but I'm sure there's some instances where it would be helpful. I just haven't found it yet. This other one is center justified. So it does the same thing, except for it lets this last line just sit centered. And this could be used in a lot of different applications, I'm sure, as well. But for this exploration, I want you to focus on this first one. And that is where everything is justified except for the last line will be flush left. And that way it is still pretty close to the flush left block of type that we're used to reading, but the rest of it has a nice hard edge on both sides. So justified type is really pretty, but it can be a little finicky to work with. So it looks nice right now because I'm working with a really easy column. It's pretty wide. There's a lot of characters per line, so there's less opportunity for the type to create issues. If you were working with a more narrow column and you had less leading, you might find that you're getting some errors. And what could happen is you get something called rivers, and that's where the word gaps in between your type becomes a little chunky, and they start to create lots of spaces down your type, and they appear to look like little rivers. This is actually still setting somewhat decent, and I think it's just a good size. So it's not giving me too many problems, but that's not really typical. So if you are having a lot of those issues, try to get more characters per line. And it could be that you need to go wider with your column or smaller with your type, or both of those options. The other thing that you could do is, if your type looks pretty good, but it's giving you a little bit of issues, is just sort of try to blend them in a little bit. And so I only have 10 points of tracking, and I only have an 8/10. So that's usually not enough for justified type. So a little bit more tracking is going to blend in the negative space between the characters, and it will have less contrast between the word space and the characters, so it will blend in. And extra leading will move these lines apart a little bit, so if there is a lot of word gaps, we won't technically notice them as much because we'll be able to follow along the line without getting distracted with a big gap underneath it. So those two things really tend to help a lot with setting justified type. And then don't forget about your footers. I think I forgot about the footer in the one above. And with these, you can kind of be a little flexible with what you want to do. I'm kind of happy with just setting this also justified and having it set off a little bit. But there's definitely fun combinations with these. Also notice I have overset type here. I generally have a rule when I have this error icon down here to always get rid of it. And so it's going to be a little difficult with these alignments to set all your types, so you're welcome to delete that last paragraph if you would like. I think at this point I might have 2 paragraphs deleted, and I'm okay with that. Just make sure you're not deleting too far up. I think 1 or 2 paragraphs is enough. And let's see, the next one is flush right, rag left. So the opposite of the first one we did. And this one is a little bit easier to set, though not as standard as flush left. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this last paragraph here because it is too long and I'm going to need the space. Great. Okay, so I've got everything set up in here already for my type specs, just like the last ones, and I've already updated all my information. And now what I need to do is just make sure my column width is as wide as I will like it. And know that it's a little bit out of the ordinary to read type flush right, rag left. So you want to give your reader a little bit of help. Technically, when you set this, you wouldn't be setting like a whole book this way. So you would do this for a more conceptual reason. And either way, you want to still make sure that your reader has the ability to read it easily. So you don't want to go too wide. Also, you want to only set it in one column. That's not to say you can't set it in multiple, but for these explorations, I'd rather keep it simple so we can just focus on the main objectives, which is the rag. So what we're looking to do is have the in and out rag like we did for flush left, except for with flush right, you can go more dramatic, which is very helpful because you can just soft return wherever you need to. So this first line goes in, the second line goes out. This third line is kind of going in, but because I can get away with more drama, I'm going to go ahead and just do a shift return, which is a soft return, so shift and return. And that's just going to give me this in, out rag. This last line is a lot smaller, which is fine. But if there's an opportunity to blend that in a little bit more, take it. If not, don't force it. So now I have this line long. I'm going to want this next line a little shorter and just start going back and forth with my in-out rag. And I have the opportunity to go a little dramatic with the in and out, but ultimately I do want to try to keep it consistent so I don't have one line going super long and another line going super short, different from the ones above. So for example, this paragraph right here doesn't have a very dramatic in and out rag like these ones do, and it doesn't really fit in very well. So I think what I'm going to do is Control Z and go back a little bit. Oopsie, too far. And force it back to be a little bit more dramatic. I think part of it is I'm getting a hyphenation right now, so, and that's okay. But that's a little bit better. And I think what I did also is I was trying to get this last line a little longer, but it was making me lose that dramatic rag, so I changed my mind on that. So just keep going down, and you do tend to spend a little bit more time with the flush right just because it is not set standard typesetting, so you do spend a little bit more time on it. And that should be good. And you can do, again, whatever you want for your footer copy. I'm deciding to keep it flush left, so I get that hard edge in the middle here, which I kind of like, and then I just baseline aligned the type. So that is flush right. And the last one we have is centered, which is actually really similar to flush right in a way, because we're trying to get the same type of rag. So it's just up here in the middle, click center, and this time we want that in-out rag, but we want it on both sides. So you can do the same exact thing that you did, but you just got to pay attention to both sides. So it's in-out. And since it's centered, it's pretty likely that you will have that in-out as on one side, you'll have it on the other because they tend to mirror each other. So I'm having a little bit of issues with this potential widow here. If this last line is a little short, that's fine. Just try not to go too short or it's going to read as a widow. And that looks terrible. Let me fix that a little bit more. Oh, wrong line. That's why it looks terrible. And just keep going in, out all the way down. And again, don't worry about deleting that last paragraph. You can absolutely do that. I can get a very good idea of how you're setting all of these alignments with a little less copy. So you can save the space and the headache that comes along with that. So that is basically it with the alignments. And the same thing with centered. You don't want to have in any more than one column. So again, not to say that you can't, but it's best to keep it to one column. And you can do whatever you would like with your footer. It's nice to set centered as well, and if you do that, keep that in the same column. If you have to get it out of the column, you can decide what you want to do, and I think that actually looks pretty bad, so I'm going to try to pair the rags up over here, which need a little work, so I'm not going to do that in the video because we've already done the flush right. But make sure you double check that you're updating your top bar here with the new content, and we're moving on to alignments. So make sure that you do your own paragraph indicator based on what you learned already in assignment 1 or 2, and update your bar over here with the new typesetting rules. And don't forget about your footers, and it's okay to delete the last paragraph. Okay, that was helpful.